Hey family, welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, Truth Spoken here. I'm starting a little bit early and I'm waiting for my guests to come on into the green room, so bear with us. This is almost like live television, right? I mean, I am live on Facebook, but there can be occasional snafus when you go live, whether it's on TV or on a social media platform. And so we're having some hiccups as my guest for this evening comes into the room. So just bear with me. And as we do that, I am going to ask you guys who are here on Facebook to share this on your social media platforms, create a watch party, or um, just share it from wherever you are. And I'm going to be doing the same thing. I can see that some of you guys are already here. So welcome. Let me just say hello to my early risers, if you will. Mike, Loretta, what's up? Donald, what's going on? OG Eric, I appreciate you guys being so prompt and being the first in the room. This is going to be another exciting night. This is another heavy hitter. One of my brothers in blue, somebody who I just happened to find some years ago who speaks like me, who looks like me, and I'm just happy to be in their company. So as soon as he finishes whatever is holding him up, I'll have him come on. And then I'll just give you a little, as I'm waiting for him to come into the room, I will tell you who will be with us on next week. So next week, I'm excited to have, we're going to have a ladies' night, and it will be my sister in the struggle, Sheriff Rochelle Belial. Some of you may have already heard me speak about Sheriff Belial. She is the first Black woman to be elected sheriff in Philadelphia. And so Rochelle and I go back. She too is a member of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability. And I'm very excited to have her join us and talk about, what it was to be a 27-year veteran on the Philadelphia Police Department, which is where she was as an officer, as well as what was it that made her want to take that leap into the political waters. I have a lot of you asking me or suggesting that I do something similar, and I have no such appetite for politics. So, yeah, that's not anything I'm even a little bit interested in. Hey, DB, what's up? But I applaud anybody who has the stamina to do that foolishness. Shouldn't say foolishness, but just to do that. Hey, Daryl, what's going on? I appreciate you all the way from North Carolina. That's good stuff right there. Mark, what's going on? I appreciate you for joining me. Oh, gee, you like the eyeshadow. Listen, dude, you don't know, because I probably haven't shared with my subbies like I do on Facebook. I've been playing in eyeshadow since I've been sequestered and sheltering in place and all of that, and so I've turned into a 12-year-old on many occasions and have so this is what I do. I play in my eyeshadow. I play in my makeup. So thank you. I'm glad that you like it, because, I'll just tell you this, and I don't know if she's in the room listening tonight, but I did have someone who looks like me, a sister girl. We can be hard on one another, can't we? Y'all know what's going on right now with everybody attacking Miss Kamala, right? And so I had a sister girl get in my DMs on Facebook and say, listen, just between you, me, and AT&T, I don't want your message to get lost, but your makeup is just a little too much. So, I had to immediately go over to her profile page and see she don't do nothing but lip gloss. So I'm like, really, girl, really? Thank you. I'm not thin-skinned. I don't take it personal, but I do me. And so thus, this is what's going on tonight. So my guest is here, and I am going to bring him into the room. Welcome, welcome, Mr. Hudson. What's up? Can you see me? Can you
How
hear me?
you doing, Sergeant Dorsey?
Ooh, let me
I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay, let me do something with my volume because my ears are about to bleed. I want to make sure everybody else can hear me, but I don't want to have my ears to start bleeding. Okay, are we good on the volume now? You hear me?
I hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. So, family, let me just tell you who's here with me tonight. I've already put it in the comments, but I'm just gonna do a little brief intro. And so, I often talk about, all skin folk and kinfolk. Well, family, I am happy. I am happy to introduce you, let you get to know some of my kinfolk. This brother here is the truth. I met Redditt about 5 years ago. We were all doing the same kind of work in different corners of the universe. And just by happenstance, we were brought together. And so he was like a unicorn to me when I first saw him, family. I hadn't seen a brother, a police officer who talks like I do. What? Not too many of them, if they exist at all, on the West Coast. So I had to go all the way east. And I don't know if you call St. Louis Midwest or what, but anyway, it wasn't West Coast proper.
I call it the South.
Okay, in the South. All right. And so not only did I meet Redditt, but I met a host of others, one of whom you met last week from the East Coast, Dr. DeLacy Davis. And so I am just excited to introduce you to him because I often have people ask me, where are the good cops? There should be others like you, and there are. And you're going to get to meet them week after week for just a little bit. And so let me tell you who Redditt Hudson is. He's a former board chair of the Ethics Projects helmed by spectacular Dr. Christi Griffin. He's worked extensively in the criminal justice reform arena for the past 15 years, including working as a racial justice associate for the ACLU of Eastern Missouri, now the ACLU of Missouri, and as a national regional field organizer for the NAACP. Redditt Hudson is also a co-founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability, of which I'm a member. Hey. And he is currently a member of the Diversion staff for the St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner. So with that, welcome.
I'm glad to be here with you, Sergeant Dorsey. I'm so proud of everything that you've done since we met. Like you said, we all met 4 or 5 years ago. You, me, Dr. Davis, our sister Rochelle Bilal, the first Black female sheriff in the history of Philadelphia. Vernon Wells, Noah Lita, NYPD, all of these brothers. D. Trotter out down in Chicago, John Mutz out there in LA with you, Alex Salazar. It was quite a meeting of law enforcement people, current and former, who recognized back when that this system is broken and it needs to be addressed from the inside out. That is, we the people who are in your position, in my position, whether we're former officers or current officers, are in the best position to directly address the racism that we see that is at the foundation of our system. So I'm so proud that you have continued your work and that you haven't slowed down a bit. And I appreciate you for staying out there with us.
Oh, I thank you for that. And so, what makes our group unique, well, not unique, but special for sure. You can't try to say that we're a bunch of angry Black men and women, right? Like they like to do, because we are diverse.
Right.
We have Hispanic officers. We have a white officer. Right. And so, and of course, you and I, folks that look like you and I. And so we are multicultural, all talking about the same thing, having experienced it different ways at different times, but all the same stuff. And so I want to start off, Redditt. I want them to get to know you and your journey and how you got to be that spokesperson on MSNBC talking about the tragedies of Ferguson, Missouri. Tell me a little bit about, first of all, you were a St. Louis police officer. What made you join and what made you quit?
Sure, absolutely. Coming up, my dad and all the men around us, we came up at a time when community was really intact where we were. I grew up in a place called University City in Missouri. It's a suburb of St. Louis. But when you talk about a Black community where, it was intact, we were supportive of each other. So many men were involved in our lives, and just in Little League sports. I got a picture that I saw on my Facebook page somewhere My Little League baseball team is like 10 or 11 players, and it's 10 or 11 fathers standing behind us. Every single player's dad is there. My dad was one of them. Another one that I played for is Coach Charles Alphen. Charles Alphen at the time was one of the highest ranking black police officers in St. Louis. This was back in the 70s. One of the highest ranking police officers in St. Louis, and him and my dad were friends. And I had seen him and paid attention to what he was doing and heard him talk about the work that he was doing. And then just over the course of the years, the opportunity presented itself for me to apply at the St. Louis Police Department. I had done work in the community prior to that, and I went ahead and applied to the department. Now, from day one, Cheryl, from day one, I was clear. I knew that I was applying to be part of a department that had a history of racism and treating black people differently than white people in that city. So I thought I could join that department and serve the community from an empowered position and address some of those issues too, while holding people in the community accountable when they violate. So Charles Alphen's influence was a big one, and other men that I had seen. Now, ironically, listen to this. Charles Alphen, whose influence probably, from a law enforcement perspective, played the biggest role in drawing my interest to that work. Ultimately, he resigned the department. He left and went to work at the King Center in Atlanta to teach nonviolent on the department. So, you know, there's a continuity in that that I think represents, you know, not only where I stand, but where so many others who are coming to the fold, thanks to voices like yours, thanks to voices like Dr. DeLacy Davis, thanks to people like Dee Trotter and Noel Leader and others. Now we're starting to see, if you pay attention, more and more officers are coming out and saying, yeah, man, this ain't going down like this. So I left the department ultimately because I was disillusioned with the criminal justice system generally and the conduct of some of my colleagues in particular. I left and wound up working at the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union here in St. Louis. And it was in that space that I began to get opportunities to publicly address the issues that I had some insight on based on my own lived experience as a community member and as a police officer, because the two, as you know, Cheryl, never separate. I didn't leave and stop being a part of my community because I put a uniform on. I'm still the community. I was still the community. I just had a different role to play in that system while I was in service to the community. So I'm fortunate in that I have been given the kinds of opportunities I've had, I think, to relate a truth about our system and its impact on our communities and the deep flaws that are in it, based on the institutional racism at the foundation of it. And I'm blessed that I have an opportunity to continue that, and that's what I plan to do.
You know, when I first saw you, Redditt, it was on MSNBC, and you were very vocal about the tragedy, the atrocity in the murder of Mike Brown and all that was going on in Ferguson at that time. And it's interesting that we're having that discussion today, right on the heels of the district attorney, newly elected brother man, kind of thinking like McCullough, not enough evidence to prosecute Darren Wilson.
Right.
What's up with that?
You know what? That's a terrific question, Cheryl. And it is interesting that you bring that up because he has caught, as you can imagine, some heat in the aftermath of that decision. I know Wesley Bell. I don't know him very well, but I know him. And he really secured that position and won that election on the momentum of the protests of Mike Brown's murder. It was that activism and the mobilization of the vote behind it that put him in a position to upset Bob Mccullough, who was one of the worst attorney generals, St. Louis County attorneys that you could ever imagine. You know, he had an entire history of utterly ignoring police violence against Black people. And so when Wesley got in that position, the expectation was that he would at least revisit the case and look at the facts. Now, in context, you know, Mike Brown was murdered 10 minutes from my house. I can walk, if I was walking right now, I could walk there in 20, 25 minutes. It was a political environment as well as a highly emotional environment when the Department of Justice sent their people here. everybody saw that the nation was erupting. And certainly Ferguson and St. Louis were erupting, much like we saw in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. So there was high pressure for resolution. The governor of Missouri had sent in the National Guard. That was the first chance, I think, that many people in the nation had an opportunity to see the militarization of the police and what that looks like when it's deployed against citizens who are exercising their First Amendment rights. But the Department of Justice came in, and I think they unduly relied on the local investigation that had already taken place, which was a mistake. But there was pressure for them to A, bring some resolution to that situation because things were erupting and getting out of control, and B, address on some level the very obvious flaws in the system that produced a result like what we saw when Mike Brown laid in the street for 4 hours in front of his mother before they decided to take him up off that pavement. So what they did was they cited the department, Ferguson, for its systemic racism, which was well known and not just limited to Ferguson, but departments all over our region and all over the country. When it comes to, for example, literally 3 people per household in Ferguson, on average, per household, you heard me, had warrants. Yeah.
Wow.
Per household. Yeah, so they cited that, but they accepted the investigation that was done locally into Mike Brown's death. Now, I interviewed 2 of those witnesses, 2 of the witnesses to the murder. And I'm telling you, Darren Wilson should have been tried on the facts. And I was disappointed when Wesley made that decision. Some people think that that is politics too, that he has on some level forsaken the root of his momentum and cause in that space for a safer space with a more establishment-oriented group. But he has caught some heat here. And in contrast now, the reason he's caught so much heat, Cheryl, is we have another prosecuting attorney here. Her name is Kim Gardner, Miss Kimberly Gardner. Remember that name. She has come under heavy fire. She was in the national news a week and a half, 2 weeks ago when Donald Trump weighed in on the fact if you saw her charge the 2 preppy millionaires in what we have called the Central West End here in St. Louis. Protesters were headed to the mayor's house who lives in the same area. Well, these 2, the couple, there are 2 attorneys, come out of their house. The wife had a pistol, finger on the trigger. The husband had an AR-15, flourishing the entire band of protesters. Kim has charged them with unlawful use of a weapon, as she should under the law. She also was the one who charged our former governor, Eric Greitens, whilst he was still the governor, with a crime that he committed against a woman here. And as you can imagine, she has gone after police officers when they violate consistently. She has put together a list of officers whose testimony and cases we won't even take. She has come under heavy, heavy fire. Heavy fire from Will.
So how do we switch Kimberly out for Wesley? Can we switch her out?
He's in the city proper, and he's in the county.
Okay.
So I said that to say, you know, everybody in the region really contrasted his decision in the Mike Brown case versus what Kimberly, standing her ground at all times under heavy, heavy fire from the media, the status quo defenders, and especially, you know, white men in power here are deeply intimidated by her and very aggressive in their posture towards trial. We just had our governor just tried to introduce legislation that would allow them to unilaterally remove her from her office.
Wow. A
democratically elected official, because they don't like the way she's doing her job. And we have a supermajority Republican-controlled state legislature. It's asinine, it's crazy, it's racist, and it's not going to fly. And surprisingly enough, you had a group of prosecutors here, white and black, in the St. Louis region who pushed back and said, no, man, you're going too far. You didn't drink that Trump racism Kool-Aid by the gallon, and now you have gone too far because this impacts all of us when you think you can just change the democratic process. She won in a landslide about a week ago in spite of a heavy campaign against her in the media and everywhere else that they tried to vilify the sister and say that she was letting all the criminals out to run loose and scare suburbia, and nobody bought it. And they stick with her because she stuck to her promise to address the systemic racism that plagues our criminal justice system here and around the country. And she's done that. So Wesley, he's put himself in a position. Now, one of the main activists here, Tory Russell, he was a key organizer. You know, Black Lives Matter evolved largely out of that Ferguson movement. And a lot of the organizers who were on the ground in Ferguson, young people who were responsible for that, Ashley Yates. She's out there in your area now, I think, either Oakland, LA area. Okay. Tory Russell, T-Dub-O, Tef Poe. These are not household names, but they should be. And Tory was at the press conference that Wesley announced that he was not charging Darren Wilson with Mike Brown's, or not going to bring the case to trial. And Tory had to be escorted out by law enforcement. And as he was being escorted out, he vowed that Wesley would not be elected ever again, and that they would work as hard as they worked to elect him. They would work as hard or harder to see that this is a one term for him because of that. Now, you know, it's yet to see how it's all going to play out with Wesley. We'll see. I'm hoping for the best. But as you know, Cheryl, it's not easy. You make it look easy. Dr. Davis makes it look easy. Others, Rochelle Bilal makes it look easy. You know, though, it's not easy to operate in this space, to say what you say, to make your stand publicly in the space, whether you are current or retired. Everybody is not in them to have that kind of courage of your convictions in a system that we've worked in and know what the repercussions and potential retaliation based on your opportunities. If you're in the department, your physical safety and everything else that comes into play. It takes something to sit where you're sitting and come with the kind of truth that you put out in front of people all the time. And it's just not in everybody.
So what's the term for this Wesley Bell? What's his term? I know he's newly elected.
I think he's got a couple of years left, I think.
So everybody's got 2 years to roll up their sleeves and get busy. Yeah. Find a replacement.
And he's got however much, and I may be wrong about that because he's in the county, but however much time he's got enough time to hopefully do some things differently. And I think people were really disappointed because in the run up to that decision, he had started to do some things differently, right? He had started to lay some things out that were a different approach than what his predecessor did, which Mccullough was just ridiculous. Another racist. And unfortunately, Mccullough had the added motivation of the fact that his dad was murdered. His dad was a police officer and was murdered on duty. And so you can imagine when he came into the position of, I'm the prosecuting attorney now, there was no officer who could do anything that was going to result in him indicting and charging and convicting them. It was free reign. Yeah.
So is that it? Is it over? Or can community apply some pressure?
I don't know. I guess if someone were to produce new evidence, I guess would be the best case scenario if somebody could produce new evidence. But again, the evidence that they had was really enough. The local investigation really stunted everything that followed. The fruit of the poisonous tree. The fact that they let in witnesses. Bob Mccullough, for example, in the grand jury stage of Mike Brown's case, allowed a woman to testify to the grand jury that he, in words, acknowledged that he knew was physically not present when Mike Brown was killed. She just wasn't there. She wasn't there. She couldn't have seen anything. And he allowed her to put information in front of the grand jury about what happened at the scene. It was that level. There was a grand juror who wanted to sue him, tried to bring a lawsuit against him after the fact, in order to have the freedom to let people know just how much he had corrupted that process. But it was all based on a deeply flawed investigation. Again, we talked to a couple of witnesses, and I'm telling you, these witnesses that we talked to, one was an older lady in her 70s, one was a woman in her 50s. None of them had ever, they didn't know Mike Brown from Adam, so they didn't have any vested interest in giving any particular version of what happened, and they both corroborated the versions of events that would have resulted ordinarily in an indictment. I'll never forget the sister, not the 70-year-old, but the 50, I guess she was in her 50s, but I had gone at that time with the NAACP president here in the city, had talked to her on the phone for an hour, trying to convince her to come in and talk to federal investigators. She was so frightened, she didn't even believe that we were who we said we were. I'm not telling you all where I am. How do I know you're with the NAACP? How do I know this? Finally, we convinced her to let us come get her. We come get her, Cheryl, and I'm telling you, you know, I'm in my 50s. You probably in your 20s, you know.
Yes. Barely, early, yeah.
But, you know, we were adults. This woman was in her 50s, and when we picked her up, she got in that car. She was so terrified that she curled up on the back seat in the fetal position to hide herself. And she wept and sobbed all the way down to the office where we had the investigators waiting to take her statement, saying the whole time, you all can't protect me. You all can't help me. They're going to do the same thing to me that they did to Michael. I know they will. They can do it, and you all can't do anything to stop it. I don't want to talk to these people. And we spent the whole ride convincing her that, no, you're all right in our presence, and you're certainly going to be all right when we get you to the office. We'll take care of you coming and going. But that was the level of fear that she had based on what she saw Darren Wilson do. And Darren Wilson, and I don't want to just belabor the point because I know it's a whole lot you want to cover, but Darren Wilson, the officer, his statement alone, listen to what he said. He claims that Mike Brown wrestled with him over his gun, if you recall. That was in his statement about the incident. He was at the window of my vehicle, and we began to struggle over my weapon. He's fighting me for my gun. And he retained his weapon. He retained it. He kept it. The inference being that Michael didn't have a gun. He needed yours. And that's why he was fighting you for it. But you kept it. So he was unarmed now, running away from you. Why are you shooting at him while he's running away from you? Why? And then you claim he turns and comes back at you, but the witnesses contradict that statement. His whole statement, all of it, should have required him to be tried on the facts. And I think had he been tried in front of an impartial jury, he would have been convicted. And
hence no indictment, right? Because everything in my mind was problematic. I said this, you know, at the time. I mean, he said he was in fear, that thing that they all like to say, right? And my thing was, dude, you're in the car, shit, roll up your window. You got a radio, call for help. If you're really scared, you don't get to shoot somebody 6 times because you're in a car afraid of them.
Right. And so Darren Wilson, Darren Wilson was 6'2", 6'3", 220 or something. Come on, man. If you're that scared, I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, we know that that's the thing that they say because, well, there's never or hardly ever any pushback, right?
Right.
And so I'm wondering, I had an opportunity to meet both of Mike's parents. Leslie McSpadden and I did a segment on Dr. Phil's show a few years ago. Yeah. And then I met his dad, Mike, here in Los Angeles on a couple of events where he was speaking out with regards to the foundation that he started in the name of his son. How are they dealing with this? Do you know?
Deeply disappointed. I know them both, Mike Sr. and Leslie. I have not talked to either one of them in some time, and I certainly haven't talked to them in the aftermath of Wesley's decision, but their public statements relate the fact that they are deeply disappointed in the decision that Wesley arrived at, and that they're going to continue to look for ways to try to see if Darren cannot be held officially responsible and accountable for what he did. And I think, too, it's important for us to maintain that kind of dialogue around issues like that going forward, because what you see now, for example, in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, what a sadistic murder that was, to watch it, horrific. For a human being to make a decision, and I'm going to treat another human being this inhumanely. But in the aftermath of that, there's been real momentum around the country for serious transformational reform, and not just necessarily nibbling around the edges, which hasn't worked in the past, in my estimate, in my opinion. The reforms never take because accountability never takes. You can give somebody all kind of anti-bias training, firearms training, whatever it is. If they don't give a damn about the policy, and they violate it with impunity with no consequences, that training is going to have zero impact. But going forward, what's going to have to happen, and naturally, we're all going to have to convene around this issue with the National Coalition of Law Enforcement for Justice, Reform, and Accountability, is that momentum, it may not wane, but I don't know if they are fully prepared for the opposition and the intensity of the opposition that they're going to ultimately face, because the changes that they're describing have to be legislated from police unions and those who back the status quo, who are well-funded and well-resourced and build out all these narratives. It's going to be vital that our voices continue to be amplified in that space, and that we continue to align ourselves with those people who are fighting for real systemic change in this country, and really trying to blow up the institutional racism that's at the foundation of our system and our nation. So we are going to have to be busy in that space if we're going to see the long-term success of what has initially started out as real momentum around the changes we want to see.
When I think about, what is being proposed as reform, I mean, to me, it just sounds like lip service, because, I hear them agreeing to everything except for, we never hear the word accountability. I say it, you would think accountability was a 4-letter word. They just can't say it. They'll take money from police departments and they'll move it around. And like I know, as a ground pounder, as a street cop, I don't give a damn what you do with money. All I care about really for real is every payday. And as long as you're not messing with that, take it from here and move it over there, take it away altogether. I really don't care. And so I don't know why police departments are so intellectually dishonest when they speak about reform and they don't address accountability.
Right. Well, I've got some ideas, and I think a lot of it has to do with race and power. When we look at qualified immunity, for example, something like that really should be on the table, because therein lies a major issue when it comes to holding people accountable for this. That's where I fear for my life carries its weight, in the qualified immunity vehicle. And if we're going to talk about real transformational change, you can't just, again, nibble around the edges. It sounds great to have, and don't get me wrong, the nibbling around the edges that they propose, if they were to really take effect, could be good. It wouldn't be harmful to the process. A national database that shows us where the problem officers are. Uniform use of force, national uniform use of force code could be a good thing, especially if we can agree on a sensible use of force continuum. Things like that could be good. But to get to the root of what we see, because I don't think that racism is ever going to be eradicated fully from law enforcement, you have to talk about a whole new model for public safety response. And when we say defund the police, for example, when I use that term, what I'm really talking about is a reallocation of funds, a redistribution. People use defund as a scare tactic. They're going to take all the money from the police and there's no be no police. Well, that's not what is meant. What is meant is we understand that poverty drives crime. Poverty and the structures that produce poverty are largely grounded in the racism that our nation was founded on. It is that which perpetuates the benign neglect of our inner cities, the disinvestment. Everybody is hollering about what's wrong, defund, don't defund. That's a bad word with police, but they defund the hell out of public education all over the country every year. They defund that at will. So reallocating some of the monies to structures in our communities, healthcare, education, housing, job opportunities, those kinds of things that build sustainable communities and allow people to thrive, will have a direct impact on crime and shape the interactions that police have with people in those communities where crime is directly impacted by better structure. Off the flip, you have to look at that. And I'm not all the way, me personally, to abolition yet. I have colleagues and friends that have thrown that around, abolition. I'm not studied up on it enough to understand how that's going to work. And that's why I have not been able to fully embrace that idea. Because again, if for example, you abolish the police and then somebody murders your neighbor, who responds to that? I mean, and when the people that respond to that or are designated to respond to that, don't they need to be trained in responding to those kinds of incidents, and aren't those police de facto?
Right.
If I'm trained to respond to this kind of incident, ain't I the police? So I'll have to learn more about it. I won't dismiss it out of hand, because I do think we're at a space based on history that transformational change is what's required. We've tried the minimal reforms. They always get defeated by the weight of the racism inside the culture of the police department that ultimately is against every reform. And they're going to be against much of what we see now by saying, hey, this is going to handcuff us. I won't be able to do my job. You're going to let all the criminals run. No, man, that's that BS. And it takes people who've stood next to those officers in the academy class and on the street to call that out.
What's changed, if anything, specifically on the Ferguson Police Department over these last 6 long years?
Well, they got new leadership. We have a new mayor there, and the first Black mayor in the history of Ferguson. They got a new Black police chief. And I think they've hired some additional Black officers, but I read something anecdotally just a day or two ago that was not necessarily encouraging about the mayor and the police chief. And it was the fact that, you know, the anniversary of Mike Brown's death was just 2 or 3 days ago, August 9th. And there was a memorial ceremony over there in Canfield Green, the apartment complex where he was killed. And so people had begun to gather and show up. And the mayor showed up. She comes to the memorial session, and some police officer is directing her that she has to park. She can't come up here. She can't drive up here. She got to park down there. And she's going back and forth from the account that I read with this officer saying, you know, I'm the mayor. I don't know, but I'm the mayor. And that wasn't enough. And she wound up having to park 2 blocks away. And the brother that wrote the article was saying, well, what we did when we saw that was we went down there and walked her up to the memorial to ensure that somebody was with her and she was escorted properly and all of these things. And at some point, it sounded like either she had a conversation with the chief who was also present or another officer who was also present. But even that didn't remedy the situation. There was kind of an indifference to it. And so they had to, at the end of everything, walk her back to her car. So things, not just in Ferguson, but throughout the region, that status quo piece and that white supremacy is a hell of a thing. And it always tries to regain its tensile strength. Like what you talk about with steel, it always tries to restore itself, even in the aftermath of tremendous upheaval, which is why I'm saying, even here with the George Floyd situation, we are going to have to convene and be ready to align with the people who are pushing at the front of this movement on the ground. Those players in the different leagues, the NBA, the WNBA, everybody has to have a collective voice. We ought to have a national convening around folks where our voices can add value, because that's going to be the point of attack from law enforcement and police unions around the country. You all don't know our job. You all don't know what it takes. You all don't face the risk we face. You don't have the training. Well, we got all of that, man, and you a damn lie. You don't have to keep murdering unarmed Black folks around the country. And it's such a hell of a thing to me to always point out for your viewers. If they want to do a little homework, do this for us and get back to her next week on the next show and tell her how many instances nationally, locally, wherever you live or anywhere you want to look at the United States that you can find of Black officers murdering unarmed white folks. Get back to me with that number, because it's going to be real low. And when it does happen, those officers are going to prison, and there's going to be no question about it. Ask Muhammad Noor.
I was just going to say, we know that to be true.
Hey, ask him, the Minneapolis, in the same city, same department where Derek Chauvin felt like I can stick my hands in my pockets and murder this dude, and I ain't got nothing to worry about. In that same city, Muhammad Noor shot an unarmed white woman out there in her pajamas and said he was in fear for his life. He said he was in fear for his life. He's in prison right now.
Absolutely, making big rocks in the little rocks for about 20-some years.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't get the Laquan McDonald murderer hookup. What's his name? Van Dyke. He didn't get the Van Dyke hookup.
He didn't get his covered up for a year. Only Right. He didn't get that hookup only to be exposed a year later when the video finally came out. And sure, you know, it's always mysterious to me why more black officers don't acknowledge those realities, man. If black officers looking at this right now, or any officer from any marginalized community, whether that's religious marginalization, sexual preference marginalization, whatever, you come from a marginalized community, you are in a position to address this reality, man. Don't act like it doesn't exist. Now is the time to create that critical mass of folks and really get ready to make this system something different, so that your kids and my kids and our grandkids don't have to live this madness, man. I'm trying to watch my language because I know your show is nationwide. I really want to cuss.
Oh no, listen, go ahead and be you. Shoot, we not on CNN tonight. This just Cheryl and Redditt chopping it up.
And it's time out, man. You know, they're going to, you see what the president's play is. He ascended to his office on a platform of pure, I'm going to restore white supremacy in America. Vote for me. And a third of the country is good with that no matter what. No matter how many people die from COVID through his ignorant ass mismanagement and befuddled response to that. His open criminality. Here's a guy who in the Mueller report, Cheryl, they pounded his ass with so much obstruction of justice in the report, and he gets his flunky, Bill Barty, Attorney General, to come out and just lie to the American people about what's in it. Meanwhile, it's amazing they compiled anything when you allow people to ignore subpoenas. When did we just get to say, no, fuck that subpoena? I'm not, you know,
right.
Fuck that. I'm not, no. When does that happen? But meanwhile, if I'm the guy who can direct people to just ignore subpoenas and then claim my innocence based on the fact that you didn't produce any evidence, that's like me being a mass murderer on video. You saw me kill 20 people. And then as the witnesses all line up to come in the courtroom, I stand in front of the court and shoot them one at a time. They all got, nobody testifies. And I say, see, I told you I didn't do it. Nobody said I did it. What are you talking? This is the kind of dumb shit that's allowed in the speaking of mainstream media, when are they going to just challenge him on the facts real time? And let's stop with this bullshit. You got him, you know, disrupting the postal service now, corrupting that process, trying to break, just an open grab for corrupted power. I'm going to destroy the election. I'm going to lose, so I'm going to break down the mechanisms that exist for the election to take place. And you're going to say mildly critical things about it, mainstream media. You're going to say mildly, you know, meanwhile, the entire Democratic experiment is being brought to a crashing halt by a wannabe autocrat, criminal imbecile, physical coward, draft dodging bastard who should have been checked a long time, but they should have walked his ass out of the White House a long time ago in handcuffs. And if he loses the election and refuses to leave, that's how he should be removed anyway.
Well, you know, I'm already believing it's gonna be bananas. I got a fucking case of Orville Redenbacher ready to go, because I'm telling you, between November and January 20th, it's gonna be bananas. He is not going to go quietly into the good night. There's not going to be a proper transfer of power. I've said this before, and you tell me what you think. I believe these white boys in Oregon are his army that have been prepping and practicing for what they're going to do come November 4th, 5th, 6th on into January. What do you think about these so-called federal agents, and we don't know who they are because they all masked up? They have no insignia other than the one that supposedly belongs to that Eric Prince, Betsy DeVos brother, right? He has some secret military force that is purportedly part of that group. I think it may be legitimate federal agents, but I think it's some bubbas and some jebs mixed in with that group. What do you think?
I think it's a lawless response from the federal government led by William Barr. What I've seen them do is violate the constitutionally protected First Amendment rights of people all over the country, especially in Portland, where they first were deployed, and one of the earlier cities where they were deployed, gassing mothers, beating kids, snatching people off the street with no ID on them, with no probable cause. We're just gonna snatch you and drive away in this unmarked ass car to who knows where. That's not part of what the American narrative has generally described us as being. And you can be sure, like to your point, that a lot of those guys are thrilled to have the opportunity to act out on their racism and their idea that anyone who has a liberal view of society in which everybody has equal rights and should be treated equally under the law, this is what we can do to you now, because we've been green lighted to go with our, repressive tactics up to and including use of force, maybe deadly use of force. Now, I will say this, I was surprised in one instance, and I think the majority of those guys would align themselves with whoever is about white supremacy and oppressing people of color, black people, and anybody they deem not white and worthy. But there was one of the members from that original Oregon group, if you remember a couple years back, one of the Bundy boys, who took over that federal building and said, the police better not come up here, we'll blow your head off, officers. If you come up here and say something to us, we're going to pull some triggers. And the officers didn't go, if you recall. Like, okay, well, maybe we won't come up. Now, they claimed at the time that it was about their First and Second Amendment rights, and they were anti, overextension of law enforcement, anti-law enforcement overreach. The one dude who was a part of that came out last week in support of Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, I meant what I said. You all, law enforcement, you all are tripping. And now y'all tripping with them. And I'm in support of them pushing back against your overreach, like I told you when I was in the federal bill. I was surprised by that. And I don't think he's representative at all of the majority of these yahoos who get out here and wave these guns around, the ones who storm up in the legislative buildings talking about, you can't make me wear a mask. And where is the brutal police response to that? When we seeing they get their ass kicked when you waving weapons in front of these officers who will shoot an unarmed black person in fear, but somehow he's not afraid of you, and you got this loaded AR and you all red in the face talking crazy. I never understood that dynamic. I get it. I'm being sarcastic. I know what it is.
Yeah. There's so much going on. It's really hard to keep track and stay focused, but in the midst of, this new vice president nominee being named and everybody is losing their shit behind that. There's a contingency of people, and it's a little disconcerting to me because I see it on my platform, and maybe you do too, folks who look like you and me who say, I don't give a damn what Biden do or who he brings on. I'm not voting for him because of his past sins. And what I say is, we need to be willing as a people to hold our nose and make those tough decisions like they were willing 4 years ago to hold their nose because they knew Trump was an idiot, but they were willing to hold their nose because they knew that he would institute the kind of bullshit that he's putting in place, that he would give lifetime appointments to folks who were inept and unqualified and just downright racist on these lifetime judicial appointments, not to mention the 2 SCOTUS appointments. And God bless RBG, because she is really the MVP. She has been holding on and holding out. And I pray that she stays healthy through this election, given that we need this guy voted out, because if this guy gets another 4 years, life as we know it will be over. There's a lady I just saw today. There's an organization called QAnon. Are you hip to QAnon?
I've heard a little bit about it. It sounds so insane. I guess I need to talk to
her. She's headed to Congress if she doesn't get voted out. She just won a primary. Her name is, you guys do your homework, don't just listen to me. Her name is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And today Trump actually tweeted congratulating her, and he says, congratulations to future Republican star Marjorie Taylor Greene on a big congressional primary win in Georgia against a very tough and smart opponent. Marjorie is strong on everything and never gives up a real winner. Marjorie Taylor Greene is batshit crazy.
Yeah, I've heard
believes in lizard people. Fucking 9/11 was a hoax. I mean, there's a whole list of crazy ass, racist ass shit that she's about. And if this heifer gets in Congress, and there's supposed to be one more just like her, that they are starting to move into the system, That with a crazy ass president, with an AG who's batshit crazy, with
who do his
lifetime
thing.
appointments to the Supreme Court. What
One
the
of the
what?
things that's
And y'all
interesting
can't
about
hold
that,
your
what I have
nose?
heard about QAnon.
Say it again.
One of the things I've heard about QAnon is interesting. I said one of the things I've heard about QAnon, which is interesting, is that they're largely motivated by some idea that a lot of people in power in Hollywood and other places are a bunch of pedophiles and child sex traffickers. Meanwhile, you got Donald Trump credibly accused of raping children, credibly accused, hiding his DNA. He won't turn over his DNA. He was with Jeffrey Epstein, who marketed young girls to people all over the world, who was murdered in prison, obviously. Quit the bullshit, man. Ain't nobody committed suicide. He was eliminated for the information that he held. But QAnon seems totally oblivious to the fact that your king, again, a physical coward who dies the draft 5 times, is credibly accused of raping children forcibly. One account, a 12, 13-year-old girl, he held her down, beat her up. You know, I mean, just, you know, if QAnon wanted to look into something, they should look into that. Now, on that VP thing with Kamala, it's interesting. I've got a colleague, very bright brother, just very intelligent, and he pointed something out because, of course, I've got friends who are saying, yeah, they can vote for her. Some of them are saying, well, no, because of her history as a prosecutor and Biden this and Biden that and all of those things. And then some are saying she's not really black. She only claims to be black selectively, which he pointed out to us and them. Look, man, about a week ago, Biden had a slip up where he said something along the lines of the Hispanic, Latinx, Latino community is much more diverse than the African-American community. And we jumped on them. We jumped on them. And they hit them with every part of the African diaspora globally, worldwide, of how widespread blackness is and you know, all the different variations and hues and just the diaspora. We're everywhere. We've got dropped off everywhere. Now, all of a sudden, when Kamala gets elected, Jamaican ain't black no more. What happened? The diaspora is no more? Is that what you're telling me? Now, you know, because the ones that got dropped off in Jamaica, the ones that got dropped off in Haiti, the ones that got dropped off here in America, and the ones that ain't the same. So that, to me, is almost a nonsensical argument. The more reasonable ones are to look at someone's record. I saw a prosecutor a defense attorney who used to be in court against Kamala in California, was on yesterday, either CNN or MSNBC, one of those. And she was saying, no, you all have it wrong. I tried cases against her and I'm as progressive as they come. And I'm telling you, she is not what you have made her out to be. And at the end of the day, the long view that you're describing is really what it's about. Because while you all are talking that shit about what Kamala didn't do and Biden's 94 crime bill, where they're obviously in a position to reconsider that legislation and maybe undo some of the harm that those pieces of legislation did, Donald Trump's shit is clear, man. If he gets
president and current
for years, you won't have to worry about it. You won't have to worry about it. And for those of you who are saying that you're not going to vote or, you know, we need a better approach, like I said earlier on a different show, my own show here in this region. Look here, man. Unless you are talking, and I don't advocate it, and I don't think you're really talking about it, but unless you are talking about armed revolution, unless you are talking about armed revolution to remake some oppressive systems, shit, you're going to have to operate inside the system that exists. You're going to have to put people in position to work for you inside the system that exists, unless you're talking about overthrowing the government. You ain't talking about that, and you shouldn't be, because that's going to wound up in too much bloodshed at this point to fathom. So, having said that, then your best opportunity to continue to do the work of remaking the system is with people who at least acknowledge that at some point we need to do some things differently, versus somebody who is trying to set the courts up so that white supremacy is cemented into everything that exists, especially as it relates to how decisions and laws get interpreted. You want to have a little glimpse of it? Look at Bill Barr. Talk about your black lawlessness. Meanwhile, he is overturning sentences for people like Mike Flynn, who pled guilty 19,000 fucking times in court and was found guilty for lying to the government and lying to the FBI. Sure, you know yourself. That's always been one of the worst no-nos we ever got coached up on, is lying to the FBI gets you sent to prison. Roger Stone, ignorant, lying clown bastard. Boy goes in there and argues for his release. These are open criminals. This is open criminality with a get out of jail free card, but they point to you and call you lawless and want the full weight of the law visited on you. That's the warm up, man. If he gets elected and is able to steal this election through the corrupted processes that he's using now, he obviously is showing you he could give a damn about the rule of law, the Constitution, or anything else. He thinks that they make the rules, and they like that. A third of the country likes that idea just fine because they think the rules are going to always advantage them.
You know, I'm seeing someone, Antoine Foster, is saying that he has a problem with Biden and Kamala because they're anti-Second Amendment. I don't know where you guys get this anti-Second Amendment. I'm not a gun nut, but I do have a couple, and they're not that. Well, Antoine Foster said that
man, we all got guns. We just don't all parade around with them in the state legislature. All my friends, they got automatic weapons, everything, man. Everything, you know, people like to talk about, oh, if it goes down, they're not ready for us. Man, look, America's got more guns than people in this country. And there's a reason for that, because we all have them. But a Second Amendment right does not mean we need to carry around, you know, war weapons that were created to kill massive amounts of people on a field of battle somewhere on the other side of the world. And the Second Amendment right that you are advocating for is the same Second Amendment right that was created back when they had muskets and one-shot pistol and all of that. I don't think the founders envisioned the kind of weapon we have now, where they go in Sandy Hook, for example, mister, and kill 20 kids who are in their classrooms trying to learn their ABCs and 1, 2, 3. I don't think they envisioned that, and I don't think they would condone us continuing to fail to address it. And when we talk about violence, because you know this, Cheryl, anybody watching our conversation that heard me go off on police abuse and killing, well, what about black on black crime? And more black people kill black people, man. Let's talk about root causes. What about the guns? When are you going to have the courage, like a Sister Letitia James in New York, the AG out there? Why is it always here lately the black women that have to take the lead on addressing the real issues and have the courage to address the real? The guns, man, are a major part of the problem. And these kids in these inner cities don't make them. They don't make the guns. Where are they getting them? Where are they being produced, and where are they coming from? If we can address that issue, you'll start to see an impact on violence as well. But certainly, if you can address the underlying issues relative to poverty and all the ills that it creates. One of my a former police chief, not a former friend, but a former police chief here in St. Louis, Dan Ison, said the best crime fighting and crime prevention resource that he ever was aware of, best crime fighting tool he ever was aware of, was early childhood education.
If you could, in the little bit of time that we have left, if you could just give 2 or 3 things that those who are listening to us tonight and those who will watch this rebroadcast could do that would make or be a step in the right direction substantively, wherever they are, what would you suggest? And then what are you doing now, and how can folks hear more of you? Because I know that you have something you do nightly, weekly. So talk a little bit about how folks can find you after this.
Sure. Well, the things that come to mind initially when you ask me that question are, one, build relationships. And I want to be specific about who I mean build relationships. Law enforcement officers, Black law enforcement officers, Latinx law enforcement officers, LGBTQ law enforcement officers. Build relationships with those in your community who are fighting for their rights. You can stand up inside the department with the support and help of the people in the community. The people in the community can stand up community can stand up for their rights and push for the change that we need to see with the support of you from inside the system. We are one and the same. You are the community, man. Don't get it twisted. I'll never understand when I saw some black officers in New York a couple of 2 or 3 years ago when de Blasio made some statement about my son gets profiled or something, and he showed up at the funeral of an officer, and all the officers turned their backs on him, even the black officers. And I thought to myself, man, what in the hell do you think you're doing with what these officers will do to your people in your community and your kids if they catch them out wrong or outright? So that's the first thing. Build some relationships. Number 2, get focused on putting together your resources and strategy to see the transformational changes that are being proposed and even some of the more marginal reforms that are being proposed all the way through to the finish. It's going to be a long process. I know emotions are still running high, and we're fully aware that the media has stopped covering some of the protests, but the protests haven't stopped. We know that. But at the end of it, it's going to be a fight, man. These police unions, some of the police union leaders nationally around this country have what I call an incendiary disregard for Black life. Just an incendiary. They are going to put every resource that is available to them in every piece and every part of the political leverage that they exercise around this country against the changes that we want to see. We have to be prepared for that. Start putting your resources and your strategy together now. And next, vote. Locally and nationally, man. Do not sit the vote out. People died for your right to vote. People killed for you not to vote. People forget to point that part out, Cheryl. It was important enough that some people died for it. It was also so damn important that some people killed for it, killed us for it, so that your ass wouldn't vote. So take advantage of the opportunity to put people in positions who are going to do for your community what needs to be done, like a Kim Gardner here in St. Louis City. You can check us out online. On my show right now, we're going to jump on some more platforms, but we just come across Facebook every Saturday at 9 Central on my Facebook page. It's called show is called The Flash Drive. We talk about all kinds of issues, local and national. And as I get ready, as I told you earlier, Cheryl, when we talked offline, I'm about to look at how to jump on some different platforms. I might have to follow your example, because I think the more of us, there's never too many of us in this space. There's not enough of us in this space, and I just never think it's too many of us in this space. I'm so grateful that you had the opportunities that you have. I'm glad to see that Dr. Davis is getting more opportunities, and I hope that others in our coalition and even outside our coalition, if they share our views, are given the kinds of opportunities that we need to balance that national discussion, because who gets to frame the issue matters, man. That mainstream shit sometimes, man, it's so lightweight. It's so missing the mark, the main marks that need to be hit when it comes to what's happening in law enforcement and criminal justice. We need voices all over the spectrum. And so I'm going to look at some other platforms, and as we get onto those, I will put that information out as well.
And you said that's every Saturday on Facebook. What time Saturday? 9
a.m. Central. That would be 10 a.m. Eastern and noon your time, LA Beach time.
Okay, I'm putting that in the chat. And do you have any other? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Instagram? You know, these social media platforms, the kids are all over the place.
I'm at Twitter, and my kids are getting ready to get me on Instagram. I've got an Instagram account that I never, ever use, and I got followers. I don't know why, because I never post on Instagram. I'm always picking up new followers. Like, I'm gonna start putting some content on there because I've been directed to. But my Twitter is at Redditt Hudson, capital REDDITT, capital O, capital HUDSON.
Okay, that's on Instagram.
That's Twitter.
Oh, on Twitter.
I don't even, you know what? I'm gonna embarrass myself. I can't even remember what my my Instagram address is or name is.
Okay, Redditt Hudson on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking time and just coming here and chopping it up with me. I hope you will come back and we can do this again. And as I get better and more comfortable in this arena. You know, I may try to bring a couple of
anybody, you're as good as anybody I've been on with. That's another thing. You're as good as anybody I've been on with. And that's another thing. We are qualified. We're media qualified. I see some of the people they put on throughout the day, and it's like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing about what
you missed a few questions that you should have asked.
What's so unique and I think great about what we do is that, well, first of all, we're not afraid to call a thing, right? And we're speaking on our lived experiences, right. And what someone can't do is argue that. And so I'm just appreciative that I've kind of started to figure this social media thing out and am bringing you guys in to introduce you. But then I plan to do this regularly so we can just talk about the things that are going on, because unfortunately, dumbass cops are the gift that keep on giving. And so we will always have something to talk about.
We have to have our own media. We say it all the time and we mean it. We have to, for that very, well, that's one of the reasons, but we have to have the ability to frame the discussion and present objective facts in context to the people that we're talking to.
Right. And, you know, and one thing about it, I ask people ask me, you know, if I get any backlash, and I know that there are folks who follow me and watch me. I hear from others. I never hear directly. And it's not that I'm, you know, I talk about Billy Badass all the time. My family know what I'm talking about, you know, and it's not that I'm Billy Badass, but they don't come to me.
Listen, let me tell some of your viewers and listeners, I've known Sergeant Dorsey now for some years. And if you think that you are coming at her or trying to do whatever it is, let me tell you something, man. She don't give a damn about you. She don't give a damn about what you're talking about, just so you know. I mean, you're wasting your time.
I tell them all the time, if you just understand that I have no fucks to give, your day will get a lot better. But and then I wanted them to know I got folks like you and Dr. DeLacy and the hologram as soon as I can nail his ass down and let them know I got brothers behind me. I am not alone. Be clear.
Be clear. Be clear, man.
Be clear. Yes. So next week, Redditt, I'm going to have Sheriff Bilal on here with me. I hope you'll have an opportunity to take a little time out of your day and watch us live, share it with your folks on your platform. And if you haven't had a chance to do that while we've been talking, you know that you can go back later and share the link with your family.
I will.
And so thank you so much for joining me and just speaking your truth. Letting me introduce you to my family. And folks, this is Kinfolk right here. This is Kinfolk. Thank you so much, Redditt. And for the rest of you, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for your comments. I see you. A condo. Somebody said they ring shopping. I'm a size 7 for anybody who want to know. We'll do this again next Thursday, family. Until then, be good. Be safe.
All right.